Okay, I'm here to welcome everybody, and I'm here to introduce our speaker today, who's Marc Zimmer. My name is Mary Devins, and I am on the Adult Forum. Here at Connecticut College, here in the First Congregational Church of Vermont. So let me read my introduction. I'm happy today to introduce my friend, Marc Zimmer. Marc and I both came to Connecticut College in 1990, so we have been friends for 35 years. Marc is the Gene Temple Professor of Chemistry at Connecticut College. He was born and raised in South Africa and came to the United States in 1986 to avoid apartheid military service and to do a PhD. Marc is a chemist with a passion for jellyfish, fireflies, and all other bioluminescent organisms. He has written 8 books and published over 65 research papers about cow flatulence, computational chemistry, and bioluminescence in fireflies and jellyfish. He was named Connecticut Professor of the Year by the Carnegie Foundation and named one of the 13 of the best college professors in the country by the Huffington Post. Go Marc. He has published articles on science and medicine for the Los Angeles Times, USA Today, Boston Globe, and the Chicago Tribune, and has been interviewed and quoted in The Economist, Science and Nature. In 2008, Marc was a consultant for the Chemistry Nobel Prize, and he and his wife attended the award ceremony in Stockholm. Marc is the initiator and director of the Connecticut College Science Leaders Program, a program to increase the number of women and minority students graduating from the college with a degree and research experience in the sciences. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you, Mary, for that introduction. Somehow it seems to have got inflated a bit. That's probably because between college relations, myself, and Wikipedia, we all added a little bit. So Mary asked me if I could talk to you a little bit about AI. I'm a computational chemist, and I use AI a lot in my research. And I give library talks, and this is stolen from one of my library talks, and it's really about the duality of AI. So on the one hand, there are really good things, on the other hand, there are really bad things about AI. And so I thought I'd just throw out a few things, see what you think. I also give workshops about AI to students and to faculty, how to use it in an educational setting. So I thought I'd also put a little bit of that in. And then I'm going to be giving a dinner talk, which is AI in quotes, which is just going to be quotes and thoughts from famous people. So what you're getting is a hybrid of all of those. Last night while watching TV, I just put pieces of all 3 of them together, and this is where this talk comes from. But to give away my thoughts is, I sort of wish AI had stayed in the box. It's really useful. I think I'm probably 20%, 30% more productive than I was before AI, but I wish it wasn't there. And not really because of what it's doing now, but because of what I fear it can do in the future. So that's sort of just putting where I'm coming from. Just to sort of show you what it can do, there's a program, this is one of my favorite AI uses that I hardly ever use. But Mary also asked me the other day, can I tell her about the program that makes songs or music? So this is called Suno.
Collaborator, ally.
This is not a human. This is a computer. And I asked it to write a song. And I gave it the title for today's talk. And I said, make it reggae, legitimate, make it 5 minutes. I got that.
Every student need a helping hand.
Sounds pretty good.
I can guide them, help.
So one of the things that really worries me is something Ray Kurzweil, okay, to see where this comes from the quotes part that I stole. He's a thinker and he works at Google, and he basically said that in our life and in nature, we're really used to linear progressions, but science is moving at an exponential rate. So science, and especially technology, is growing faster and faster and faster. Faster than government and governance, and education keeps up with. Education is probably less than linear. So AI changing so fast is really a problem. So our intuition about the future is linear, but reality of information technology is exponential. It makes a big difference. If I take 30 steps linearly, I get to 30. If I take 30 steps exponentially, I get to 1 billion. Right? So it's changing so fast, and AI especially. Right? So if I learn chemistry, and you, for example, art history, French, Russian, and physics, putting our knowledge together is very difficult. But if you take AI systems that have learned all these things, you can put them together and instantly they'll know all 5 of these areas plus all the intersections and understand them. So AI can learn really, really, really fast. So this is one of my favorite quotes from Haldane. Haldane is one of the most famous biologists about 100 years ago. And he said, really gruesome quote, it's an essay called On Being the Right Size. And he says, a rat is killed, a man is broken, and a horse splashes if you drop them from a high building. And that's sort of what I think about this technology with AI. It's growing so fast, it's so big, so powerful, that things can go wrong really easily. So just a little bit background credential maybe. So I'm a computational chemist. I use AI in my research. I wrote a book before COVID. It came out during COVID about science and the state of science. And it was in 4 parts: old science, new science, good science, bad science. And the new science, this was written in about 2016, was AI and also CRISPR, gene editing. So I've written this chapter about AI when it was just in its infancy. And so I've been very interested in it ever since. So if you look at the title of the talk, AI, your tutor, collaborator, creative ally, hallucinator, intellectual thief, polluter. First of all, AI. What is AI? And at the moment it's sort of a catchphrase for everything, used mainly to sell products and sell ideas. It's a bit like if we go back in history when electricity was first found. If we then called everything that used electricity, that's sort of the stage we're in. And there's some funny things like calculators. It's artificial intelligence, right? The calculators do thinking. Why isn't that AI? And then there are other things that people call AI, and it's all just mainly to try and sell something to you. So there's a whole book about this called AI Snake Oil. It's about how AI is being sold. So what really should we be thinking about if we think about AI? And the really important part of AI is something we call machine learning, where the computer, instead of having code, instead of us writing, if this happens, then do this, then that's, instead of that, if the computer can learn by itself, we call that machine learning. And that's really, really where everything's happening. And then there's a special part of machine learning where the computer has learned to think like the human brain. And that's called deep learning or neural networks. So that's maybe a better word for that. So there's a really good book which talks about AI and the brain and the similarities and how the two come from each other. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about how it works. And so, this is really a good example. So, I'm from South Africa. I never played baseball. I played cricket. With cricket, if the ball comes at me, you pick up your right hand and you catch it with your hand. Baseball, right, you put a glove on, you catch it with your left hand, and then you take it out and throw. So when I first played baseball, my brain was just going crazy. It's like, what do I do? Where do I go? This ball's not doing the right thing. I've got to stand there, I'm looking at the arc. My brain was flooded. And that happens with anything new that you learn as well. And then as you learn and do it over and over and over, and repetition, unfortunately, is needed. As you do that, your neurons form connections, synapses. And the stronger those synapses are, means that what part you've just learned was something really important. For example, the arc of the ball, right, to get in the right place. That's an important thing. If you catch the ball 100 times with your glove with your left-hand side, it becomes natural. And that's because your brain has learned how to do that. It's taken the things that aren't important, ignored them, takes the things that are just minorly important, has them in an upper layer, things you've done over and over in a deeper layer, much stronger layer. And so if you look at a 2-year-old's brain, that 2-year-old has more synapses at that stage of its life than any other time. Because as it gets older than 2 years old, it starts trimming the excess information to be more streamlined, to be able to think properly. But at 2 years old, a child can get over 100 million synapses in 1 second as it's learning. Right? And then a lot of that stuff was excess stuff. And that then gets trimmed away. So what if we could take a computer and teach a computer to do this? And so what we look there on the right is sort of the equivalent of a computer's brain. What it's doing is got, on the left there we see input, all x1, x2. That's all the information going in. At the end of it all, you've got the output, and we know this is wrong or right. Right? I'm catching the ball, or it's hitting me on my nose. Yeah, that's not a good outcome. So every time I catch the ball, we know that's working well. So you can give weights to certain parts of knowledge. Things that are important, that are used a lot, get us high weight, and they go in lower layers. And things that are unimportant get a very small weight, and they end up in the top layers. So that's how you can teach a computer to be like a brain. So Dennis Hasabasis, he was from a Greek family, grew up in London, and at 4, he beat everyone in his family at chess. At 6, he started playing competitively. At 8, he was the team champion of England. And at 14, he was number 2 in the world. At 15, he decided, I want to do chess. I want to teach a computer to think like me. He applied to Cambridge when he was done with high school. Cambridge accepted him, but said, you're too young. Take 2 years off and do something constructive and come back. He went to a computer gaming company and designed a game. This was quite a while back. And at the time, he sold about 1 million copies, which was one of the top-selling games. And as a 16-year-old, and it was a game where you built a factory, and you could put parts together and everything like that. And he thought to himself, can we do something where the computer thinks like a human brain? And so what he did is he took 2 computers, and he said, okay, what you're going to do is this computer is going to play against itself 1 billion times. All I'm giving you are the rules. This computer is going to give those weights that I just showed you. And it'll look in chunks And then they'll see, this strategy works really well under this condition. I'll weight it high. This was a really sucky move. It's not going to be a good thing unless this happens. And so without any other instructions, he did that. 4 days later, he had this program, chess game, that was really, really worked well. At the time, the strongest and the biggest chess program was something called, anybody remember IBM Blue? Yeah. That was the biggest computer around at the time. And that had been programmed to play chess. And it played chess against the world champion, Garry Kasparov, and it beat him. But he was totally unimpressed. He said, the only reason this thing beat me was because it was programmed and it really churned out so many moves and it couldn't think as fast as could think faster than I can, but I can think prettier and better than it can. Well, they took this program on IBM, played it against the desktop, the normal old IBM desktop, which had been programmed to think like a human, and in 100 games, Stockfish never won, and the little computer won, I think, 20 or 30 games and tied all the rest of them. But, and here's the important thing, when Kasparov, the world champion, looked at the games, he was totally blown. Because the computer was using strategies that no human had ever used. They were unknown. It had actually come up with its own way of beating this clunker. And so he said, so Stockfish, 70 million positions per second. That's what IBM Blue did. Right? So it really was going through every possible permutation. Whereas AlphaZero, which is this new program, only did 80,000 per second. Still a lot of thinking, but nothing like the big program. And so Kasparov in Science magazine wrote this editorial, and he said, in this case, it's a bit like a model organism of reasoning. That's what AI is. It's thinking like a human. So at that point, Hasabasis, the guy who came up with this program, thought to himself, well, what else can I do? He thought, well, chess is pretty easy. Go is really hard. And Go has been around for a long time. It's mainly played in Asia. I'm going to teach the computer to play Go. Within 6 months, the team was now 8 people. They'd got this program that could really play Go. He challenged the world champion. And this is sort of weird to all of us. In a game that was watched by more people than any Super Bowl ever, because all the Chinese and all the South Koreans and all the Bangladeshis were watching this Go game, it beat the world champion, who was from South Korea, and it was very emotional. He started crying halfway through the game when he saw what was going to happen. And this was actually the time at which the Chinese government decided, whoa, we got to put a lot of effort into artificial intelligence and machine learning. And they then started really, we had the Sputnik moment in America, this was sort of the Chinese Sputnik moment, and they decided, we've got to put some effort into this.
What year was it?
So that would have been about 2016, 17. So, I'll skip this. Hasabasis then decided, games, right? I'm going to do something useful. You always wanted to do something useful. Can I use this for something useful? And this is the idea he came up. To me, this is probably the biggest and most important thing that artificial or machine learning can do. And that's to predict how protein folds. So if you have a protein is just a string of amino acids. And if I'm interested in a protein that gives off light. If you take the message and how to make that, you put it into any organism, it'll make it the same way in any living organism. It'll always fold the same way. Once it's folded like that, it'll give off light. So how does something fold? Well, it turns out it folds really quickly. So getting from the DNA to making it and folding it takes about 1,000th of a second. Yet, the possibilities that it has are 10 to the 300, which is more than there is sand grains on this earth. So how does it do it that quickly? It was called the grand challenge in biology. Nobody could do it. So for over 70 years, everybody knew if you've got this sequence of amino acids, it folds a certain way, but nobody could predict it. The only way you could predict it was you could take a crystal of a protein, zap it with an X-ray, calculate it, and you could get what you see in the bottom left-hand corner there is the folded structure of a protein. If you have Alzheimer's, if you have Parkinson's, most neurodegenerative diseases, what's happened is a protein is misfolding. It's not folding right. So that's a big problem. If you know how a protein folds, you can have something bind to it, dock it, a pharmaceutical, and you can treat the disease. Again, huge, big problem. To do a crystal structure would take about 4 grad students, 5 years, PhD, cost about $250,000 on average. So it's an expensive thing to do. The funding agencies all over the world, China, Europe, America, said if you've got a crystal structure and you want to publish anything about it, you have to put it in a database. So the rest of the world knows the shape of that structure. So that database is called the Protein Data Bank. You can see there it had 190,000, about 200,000 structures in it. You can see with time how more and more structures were solved. But in all of history, all of humanity has managed to do 200,000 of them at the cost of close to $10 billion. Right? So could a computer do this, is the big question. So what you have, and was really important, you have what we call a training set. We know that those 200,000 proteins have a certain shape, and we can see what they are. Now can we teach the brain and the computer to figure out what that is? So this lends itself to doing this. Here you can see the calculated versus the actual ones overlap. Green is the one that costs 200,000. The blue is the one that takes 10 seconds to calculate. It costs nothing. You can now go and use this program called AlphaFold. It's online. You can just type in your amino acid sequence. It'll give you the 3-dimensional structure for free. I spent hours and hours and hours writing grants to get computer time on the world's biggest computer to calculate small little parts of a protein. Now I can do it for free, really, really quick. So this is Nature. Nature is one of the biggest journals in the world, one of the most important ones. It says it'll change everything. DeepMind, so DeepMind is the company that Dennis formed after he started the chess game. AI makes a gigantic leap in solving protein structures. At this point, Google bought up the company. He's now second in command of Google. So he has a lot of computing sources. A few years later, so you can see this is in 22, the entire protein universe is known, 200 million structures. So every DNA that has ever been sequenced, now we know what the protein looks like. So we go from 200,000 to 200 million in about a year. Right? Not only that, the next step is now they calculate how a small little molecule will bind to a protein. And that's really important to making drugs. And already the drug design that took 8 to 10 years is now taking 6 years. Because we've cut out a lot of the early stuff. So this is AI. Yeah, we like this. This is good. Because we also all know about AI things that we don't like. And so they won the Nobel Prize in chemistry for the computational design of proteins, programs that can calculate proteins designs. Any questions about that? I've been going pretty quickly.
So once the protein has been designed or detailed, that's when they can figure out how the molecules can affect the protein? Is that the next step in the machine?
It really depends. You can do it in all kinds of ways. If you know, I've got this drug, but I don't know how the drug works, then you can go through 200 million structures and say, hey, which of these 200 million structures likes to bind with my drug? And then you'll know, oh, this is probably what I have to look at. This might be helping cure whatever this drug cures, and therefore this is probably what's causing the disease in part. Or you can go another way. If you have something and you can design a drug that will bind it. So you go in all kinds of different ways.
You could design a drug that binds to the protein, but then alters how it affects the mind or whatever else it's affecting, right?
So that's one step further. That's a lot harder. Yeah. And so, I mean, from pharmaceutical industry, we know that you can do this 200, 300 times. They all bind very nicely, but they still don't do what they're supposed to do when you go into a mouse. And then if it works in the mouse, it doesn't always work in the human. So this is just taking out a lot of fiddly work at the beginning. You still have to do a lot of work in the lab to see that it really does work.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yes?
Given that this is an open database, are there safeguards for protecting the integrity of the information?
So in this case, the information, the human, well, not the human genome, the whole genomic studies, every sequence that's ever been published is in the big database. So that's public knowledge. So now all you've done is basically, you've translated that DNA to a three-dimensional shape. So there are no really safeguards. What you'll see later on is with the knowledge that AI now has in ChatGPT 5, you could theoretically design a chemical war agent using AI and using this type of information. So really, I'll come to that in a little bit. I don't know if you want me to. So just a little twist in another direction. So how do I use AI in my teaching? So I've got what's called an active learning generator, and I'll upload my slides, I'll upload whatever I'm going to be teaching, and I'll say, give me 4 suggestions of things that will make my class more fun. And one of the things I've taught it is it'll do a Wordle, it can do connections. Those of you that watch BBC, it can do pointless, it can do all kinds of games. So one of them will always be a game. So here, for example, this was the first class, I just took it because it's relevant here. I put this, you know, how many people play Wordle? So quite a few, right? So in my case, it's a chemistry Wordle generator, but this is just, if you look at the green ones, those are in the right place, the O is in the wrong place, DNS aren't in the word. This is just hello.
Hello.
Hello, yeah, thought it was a friendly way to start. So that's one of the ways I use it. A way that I wanted to use it, and I don't use it, is, so there's something called Notebook LM. Anybody heard of Notebook LM? Oh, this is going to be fun. Again, I did the same thing. I uploaded all my notes from the class. And one of the notes was this. It's just this picture. Right? 2 pigs. One of them is yellow fluorescent nose. Mary, I think you've seen it before. So, yeah. What is Notebook? So this is my intro chemistry notebook. And so what I've done is on the right-hand side, you can see I uploaded the PowerPoint slides for the day, including that paper picture. I uploaded the whole textbook. I uploaded my syllabus. And then on the right-hand side, you can see a whole bunch of buttons. So you just upload it like you do any computer file. There, it'll tell you, oh, I've got 3 sources. It'll summarize what they say. If I click on the audio, it will give me a podcast. There will be 2 people talking to each other. And they'll say, wow, you know, I thought that pig was really interesting there. Why did Professor Zimmer use that pig? And then the other person will say, well, I think I've seen this pig before. It's a genetically modified pig, and it's modified with a yellow fluorescent protein in its trotters. And its nose, that's why the trotters in the nose are yellow. And it was a first experiment to see if we can do xenotransplantations from pigs into humans. So could we take a human kidney, a pig kidney, put it in a human? And the idea really was, could we genetically modify the pigs so certain proteins and certain sugars that our immune system looks for are in the pigs? And so if we take that pig kidney, put it into a human, the human won't reject it because it's looking for these proteins. And they aren't pig proteins, they're human proteins. And it says, yeah, I'll have your kidney. And in fact, this has been done. There's one person now that's lived 200 days and through the opening pitch of the Red Sox game with a pig kidney, taking no medicines, no dialysis anymore. So it works, right? But it knew that, and it also knew that at the bottom I'd written chemistry question mark. So in the podcast it then said, I presume Professor Zimmer is trying to show us that chemistry isn't just chemistry, everything is now combined. This is medicine, this is chemistry, this is biology, it's all together. And so it could do all of those things in this little podcast. And I could also So what it's doing now is it's generating what's called a mind map, which is sort of a map. It's done. Okay, so it's done that. So it's a map here that's taken everything I've put in there, and at the right, on the left-hand side, it says introductory chemistry. Then it's got some things from our syllabus, things from the textbook, all kinds of things. If I am interested in course logistics and grading, for example, I press those. I press on the left, I'll get a summary. I'm going the wrong way. And it can do all of that. It can even make a little video recording for me in which it will talk and give slides, summarizing everything. But in the end, I thought to myself, I'm not giving this to the students because they're not going to come to class. I also thought that if I look at this and I use all of this to teach myself the chemistry, even if I could do it without any help, I still wouldn't get any more than a B minus, maybe a C plus. So I decided I'm not going to use it. But it's just amazing to see how quickly you can do something like that.
Question?
Yes?
What's the software program? And
So-
can anybody buy it, or do you get it through your institution?
So it's a Google product, and we're a Google campus. So at Connecticut College, all the students get it for nothing.
Okay.
But it's called Notebook LM.
Learning.
Yeah, so anybody can buy it. I think you might even get some free usage if you just go and get it. It's certainly worth looking at. Other questions?
When you say it's a Google campus, this I went to college a long time ago. Does each college subscribe to Microsoft or Google or
So
Apple or
typically,
something?
we all have what's called Moodle, which is where you put all your notes, and where you put everything. And then the college pays for, in our case, Google, so we get our email as a Gmail mail. and we get all the Google products. And so today there's a huge big race between all the Google stuff and the OpenAI stuff. So Gemini versus ChatGPT. And most of this competition is taking place on university campuses. And we'll talk a little maybe about equity. The markets really are Europe and America. And so they give all this stuff for free to college students because they're hoping the college students will get jobs and then will buy their products. In summers, I go to South Africa, teach at the University of Stellenbosch. They have none of this access. So the equity between developed world and South Africa, Lebanon, the rest of Africa, that gap is getting bigger and bigger because they just don't have access to it.
What about predicting human behavior? An example being war games. Who's going to be the one to fire the first shot?
So one of the reasons that this AlphaFold, which is the folding of proteins, works so well is because you've got a three-dimensional static structure. You've got 200,000 of them. And so your endpoint is when you can mimic that. With human behavior, everybody's got slightly, if I were to ask all of you about your opinions about AI at this point in time, you'd all have different ones, even though you've all been sitting here. And so human behavior, military behavior is not as predictable. And it's sort of, a lot of the people are selling programs trying to predict dating behavior, big market, military behavior, purchasing behavior. Yeah, most of them turn out to be, there's no proof that they actually work at this point. So, but sending drones from Russia to Ukraine, Ukraine to Russia, drones are something that you can really work with, and drones often are AI driven. So yeah.
So similarly, in the same parallel, what avenues are governments using AI? What is the government encouraging people to do in terms of research, and what direction is it headed?
So in the big bill or whatever it was called, one of the few things that was scratched out was a line that said AI development should not be constrained in any way. That's the only thing of any importance that was taken out of the bill because enough people didn't want it in there. But still, for two reasons. One, competitiveness. The US, it's really the US and China. Europe, not that much. But US and China both want to be in front of this machine learning game. And so to be competitive, they're quite willing to cut corners, cut guardrails and things like that. And then the other is government just can't keep up. I can't keep up with it, and I'm a computational chemist. So somebody who hasn't got a science degree or anything like that just can't keep up with the capabilities of AI. So that's really very difficult. It gets me to sort of to so one of my favorite quotes is Ian Golding. Ian Golding was the economic advisor of Nelson Mandela's. He had to leave South Africa like I did about the same time because of the military in South Africa. Thought he'd never be able to come back, and went to Cambridge. And then at some point Mandela became prime minister. He could come back. Mandela invited him to be his economics advisor. When Mandela retired, he went to Oxford, started his own department in Oxford, which is all about global interactions. And so in 2014, it's quite an old book, he wrote this book called The Butterfly Defect. Most of you probably heard of the butterfly effect, where through chaos theory, if something happens in Thailand, a butterfly flapping its wings, there's a very, 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 very small chance, but not infinitesimally small, that could influence behavior here. And he basically said there's something called the butterfly defect, which is when something goes wrong in one place of the world because everything is so connected that it could cause chaos throughout the whole world. And in the chapter about medicine, 2016, he predicted a global pandemic that would start in the food market in China, that would cause a backlash, a xenophobic backlash against China, that would cause supply chain shortages, including toilet paper, that would require masks, but masks would not be used for political reasons, that would create large political divides, and a whole bunch of other things. So, but his conclusion of all of this is progress is associated with risk. Right? The bigger the progress, the more the risk. If we now think about AI and we think about growth, it's growing faster and faster and faster exponentially. There's more and more progress, more and more risk. And so if we think about why I don't like AI, it's basically this question of risk. It's a question of somebody misusing it, somebody using it to be able to design chemical warfare agents, use drones in Gaza, things like that. Using this for things that we should never be using. And the temptation for a lot of people is just too great. I also like the thinking of Bill McKibben. Bill McKibben, one of the things he says is if you look at nature, all the systems in nature grow to a certain age and there's maturity. Think about your teenage child. If you've got a teenage child, a grandchild, they grow to teenager. If they don't stop growing, we'd be very, very worried. And this isn't everything. So why should the human economy be a growth-based economy that's always growing? Haven't we reached the point where we should be at maturity, sustainability? Adding another thing like AI is really scary. If this was a perfect world, I think AI would be great, because I think that could reduce our work week to 3 days, and have AI do anything, all kinds of things. But I don't think it's a perfect world. Then you add to the fact that if you've got AI, you can use AI with gene editing. And now you've got two really, really potent methods coming together. Great. You could probably, so I teach environmental chemistry, and up to a year ago, I always ended it with, we're cooked. If you think the way we changed our lives with COVID was dramatic. In order to stop climate change, we have to change our lives even more. Now with AI, there actually is a solution. We can design bacteria that suck up carbon dioxide and put out fuel sources. It's not designed yet, but that's quite possible. But the problem is when you've got that technology, you can also design bacteria to do all kinds of other things that are even more scary as that is positive. So that's sort of George.
We could talk about truth and honesty in the classroom.
Okay, so
What was the question?
George and I were both at Connecticut College. George taught English, I teach chemistry, and he was asking about truth and honesty in the classroom. So Conn College is a liberal arts college. It's got an honor code, and students can take exams in a room actually the whole building at a certain time. Nobody's proctoring them or anything like that. It's very tempting, no? Just take a picture of your phone. You can even buy glasses that have a camera, and you get the whole answer to your chemistry paper. It can write, so I use it occasionally for writing as well. It writes exquisitely well at times. So what do we do about this? So I have to confess, this is the first year I'm using proctored exams. So even though there's an honor council, 60-70% of my students were showing abilities, that, especially in math, that were higher than they had. Yeah, so
But how about writing student papers?
yeah, so I mean, I'll tell you a story. So I write quite a lot for newspapers. I wrote an article that was about, it had to be 800 words. Newspapers like about that length. I was at 2,000 words. And so it took me about 4 hours to get that down to 800. And then I thought, hang on, I'm going to see what AI can do. So I went to my AI program, I uploaded about 10 of my papers that I'd written, and said, this is how I write. Can you now take my paper and give it to me in 800 words? And so I had these two, the one I've written, the one that AI summarized for me. My wife always proofreads my stuff. She's an elementary school teacher, she's an excellent editor. So she's read a lot of my stuff and said, this is what I did, read them, what do you think? And she read them and she said, oh, you don't have to worry. Yours is still way better than the AI one, and gave me the AI one thinking that I So then I used some of those ideas. I put them in my article. I sent it to the editor. I explained to the editor what I did. And he said, thanks for being truthful. Can you send me the steps of your thinking? I sent all of that to him and he said, yep, okay. We'll publish it.
But how about honesty? Students' honesty in using AI?
Yeah, so for most students, there are two. So in my class, I also let them use AI at times. And so what I find is that the really strong students don't want to use AI. They want to be independent. The medium students, there are some that use it and actually gain from it. The weak students, they don't have the bandwidth to learn from it and still do what, so they actually stay the way they are. And when they use AI, it's used so badly you can immediately see what you're thinking. But then you get the students, if I look at the homework grade versus the test grade, what I find is there's a certain number of students, about 20%, who've got really high homework grades, really bad test grades. So I gave them all an evaluation asking them about their use of AI and correlated with grades and everything. It turns out that what happens is it's the ones that come, the deadline's an hour or two away. They can never finish it, and so then they use AI. And so I think most of the dishonesty comes in at that point. I don't know what the numbers are in my chemistry class. It was about, well, in the test it was as high as 80%, in the final as high as 80%. In the tests it's about 20. Yeah, it's a big problem. I think since COVID there's also been a different perception of what's cheating or not. I think that came through the Zoom classes.
So how far do you think we're away from where the machine is going to, you're already saying the machine's learning on its own. Like you've seen out of MIT, robots learning how to play soccer and then realizing the mistake they make and how to make a better goal and all that. How far is it the evolution of a situation where they write their own code and do their own decisions?
Yeah, I mean, that's what some people want to do. I think it's a very scary direction. And from what I've read, some people are saying within 3 or 4 years, other people say 10 years, but probably not much longer than that. So what's also interesting is if we look at AI development in China versus America, they're going in different directions too. So in China, it's a lot more pragmatic. A lot of medicine is going the way of AI. The idea ultimately being that you can have a small monitor in your blood. It will be like going for very extensive metabolic tests every day, and it'll monitor all your readings of all your iron, cholesterol, everything in your blood all the time, and it'll be able to compare that readings from data of 1 billion people, for which we know a lot because in China there aren't really that strong medical rules, so they know everybody's diseases, and it'll tell you, hey, you should take this medicine now. You should cut out this food, anything like that. And so it's very much preventative medicine. That's one way. And then the other way is they've got a highway now that's only for trucks, and only trucks that are self-driving. So the idea is if you have a, like Tesla and all these companies that want a self-driving car, Gizmo with a self-driving taxi, it's really difficult because humans are unpredictable. But if every truck is using AI, it's like a train, right? They're all connected together when they drive. So that's sort of where it's going. Yeah, so just quickly, those are some of the books I've written, more for fun than anything else. And I think I'd love to answer questions. Anybody, any questions about AI or honesty?
Okay, so you're at a private university, and you're going to find private universities that have access to tools like the Google Suite that you talked about. What's going on in public institutions? And that question is all the way from community colleges up to the finest public universities.
So I would say the biggest divide, if we now look just at America, is between public high schools and private high schools, and I suspect a high school like Old Lyme versus New London. So the higher income, the more money the school has, the more AI they have. In general, I think the students come to Connecticut College knowing more AI than the faculty. And I think that's probably the same in most universities. What's interesting, some universities, WPI for example, which is an engineering school, has instituted AI in every class policy. So they've gone the extreme, we have no policy, which is even worse because it's very confusing to the students, because they don't know what's on us, because we have no policy. We aren't telling them you can use it for this but not that. We aren't telling you can't use it at all. We're just like, yeah, every faculty member will be different, but most of them don't know what to say, most faculty don't have a policy. So that's really difficult. So there's a spectrum amongst faculty and amongst institutions.
So is AI prompting a shift in the goals of what you want to teach your students in terms of, it's not so much retaining knowledge, but maybe higher level things like being critical thinkers or communication, I don't know. Is that paradigm changing somewhat?
I mean, personally, I'm dyslexic, so having word processors changed my life. And that's just a tiny, tiny microcosm of what AI will be doing, right? So it's going to change the way we think. I don't know if I have this quote here. Oh well. But my grandchildren will most likely not need to know how to read or write. This is from a Connecticut high school director of Litchfield. So all of Litchfield right there, writing. And it's really true because what's going to be happening is, right, like we saw about Notebook, it can abstract everything and give you the highlights of all of that. You'll be able to talk to somebody. You'll have glasses that will read everything for you. I went to a really interesting talk by a psychologist who said, so you're all complaining about students who don't read as much as you did. It turns out, studies have been done, they read more than us, but they read differently. We used to read books. They read chunks, social media, headlines, bottom of the TV, all kinds of short, lots of short, but if you count the words and you compare that to 30, 50 years ago, they're actually reading more words than we did, but just differently. So I don't think this is that far away, even though I don't like it.
Doing it with less comprehension, though. They're not really thinking about it.
Well, they're comprehending in different ways, because I see that with my students. They can pick up things much quicker than I can, but I can get much deeper than they can.
Exactly.
So it's a it's a different way. But now AI can get that depth. So that's where it gets really scary.
But the AI is doing your thinking for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of a world is that?
AI and science, what AI and the controlling the people or conversations or thought processes. Have you done any, do you have any information on that?
On AI controlling,
The thought process of, let's say, a state or a nation or people. We have a lot of discourse now, and people are blaming it on AI. Is that a fair comment?
I don't know that much about it, which means it's not a big thing in the sort of AI community, but I also wouldn't go out and look for it. So yeah, my answer is sort of what you want. Okay.
I hope you'll come back.
That's a scary story.
The other thing I wanted to ask about ethics, the ethics of AI and boards of ethics. You know, I know it's all open now, but how do we make that happen? Because that's one of the things that concerns me. How can we support that?
So the really interesting thing is that both OpenAI and DeepMind, the two big companies, started off with idealistic young people trying to design this for the better of the human race. And then they became so competitive that one signed with Meta, Facebook, and the other signed up with Google because they needed all that computer. And in the process, they lost all their ethics and their, not only the personal ethics, which they might still have, but I doubt it, but the people who started the companies with them because they were going to be an ethical company. And Mustafa Suleiman, famous ethicist, who started with DeepMind and was 8 people, he decided, said, I'm not doing this anymore. So it really is, everybody's trying to race to get to the place where large language models are as good as humans. And so if you're talking about the ethics of, I mean, there's so many layers of ethics.
Right.
But that's the ethics of designing it. Then there's the ethics of, it basically took everything on the internet, including all the illegal book repositories. So you can look up, there's a website, you can see if it's got anything. It took 88 of my publications without ever asking me. So yeah, it's taken a lot of these things, but on the other hand, other people also write libraries, YouTube books, people read them and then use it without a citation somewhere. But that's also ethics. And then the ethics of using AI in places where there's no legal or ethical watchdog to see what it's doing. And it turns out that one of the biggest uses of AI at the moment is in counseling. Where instead of having counseling, instead of having a counselor that you go and see, you talk to a machine. And that's huge amounts of money. Medical insurances are letting this happen. And so the ethics of that also is.
My daughter-in-law has a PhD in biomedical engineering, and she works for a company called Verily, which they're doing intersection of AI technology, healthcare, and medicine. And she said, and she's at my house now, she said, pretty soon we won't need doctors, we'll need nurses, but no doctors. It was sort of shocking.
So basically, Mary has a daughter-in-law who works on the same thing as I was explaining that the Chinese have, and she was saying that we won't be needing doctors. And most of my students want to go into medicine, and I tell them I would not go into medicine because a computer can do what a doctor can do much, much more efficiently in 10 years. So medicine in 10, 15 years is going to be a totally different ballgame. Because with an AI like that, it can just take all your diagnostics, look at a huge, huge database, and figure out very, very quickly.
Does a computer have to find malpractice insurance?
So what we're talking about is the new definition of honesty.
A different one, yeah. Does it include operations? Yes, especially these laparoscopic, which are done by a robot. So more and more.
So that's controlled by AI.
It can be controlled by AI. Yes. My wife went for a mammogram at Lawrence Memorial, and at the bottom of it I then read that it had been done by an AI program. But I then looked up the papers and so on, and it turns out AI does a better job than the human readers, because it's just seen so much and can see things that we don't know about. It's like the chess game. And that's really a good application of AI, because you've got hundreds of thousands, millions probably, of mammograms, and you can go then mammograms from 5 years ago and see which of those actually got a growth, a tumor, and then you can train on that. So it's really good at radiology.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.